Hello and welcome back to more Elden Ring things you didn't know in our new content update patch of 1.08, which in my opinion has been a great patch for the PvP scene and the long-term active player base, which is largely about PvP and creating builds, which is, yeah, mostly myself as well. While it certainly isn't a massive content update, it does give PvP players 3 new areas to play in, consistent matchmaking at that, and defined rules for duels and so on. I'm really happy with that. But not everyone is with this patch, understandably. We're going to jump straight into our first thing. There have been rumblings in the community that this patch took so long because it was actually meant to be more than it was. That perhaps it was meant to be our first paid DLC update, therefore having a lot more content involved, as the now deleted tweets by Lance McDonald refer to this patch as DLC 1, which suggests something occurred that caused its delay or full form. However, as we know, Elden Ring has more coming. It's not much of a surprise that a massive success of a game like this, they'd want to continue it, make more for it, make more off of it, and Lance coincides with that, saying that further development of Elden Ring continues and that we should be confident in what they're currently working on. Personally, I knew there would be negativity about this patch because ultimately it is a PvP based patch. I imagine it's disappointing for people who are not interested in just PvP, and especially in the case of Lance, surely it's disappointing if you knew or thought it was going to be a lot more than it actually is. Lance has since apologized for that negative outlook about this patch though and deleted the tweets. Again, I completely understand the people who have no interest in PvP not being happy to see a content update finally have nothing to do with them. But I also certainly appreciate the people who have said that PvP is not their thing, but they're glad the PvP community got something anyway. But whatever Lance was referring to, I think it was more about what this patch was planned to be, and this is obviously less than that. Could there have been bigger plans that were put on hold that the PvP update was meant to be a part of? It's interesting to think about, and would be a shame if so. Next up then, we have one to do with the walking mausoleums again, which actually, I guess we're technically not really concerned with the big turtle guy here. We're actually more concerned with the ghosts that are around it. You see, I've never stopped to think about why all of these ghosts are here. Why are they headless specifically? They wander around. You can find more up the church over there. And in fact, this isn't the only walking mausoleum where you can find these spectral, spooky guys wandering around. Frosterzen makes this really good point in the comments of last time, suggesting that the skulls on the legs and areas of the mausoleums that you destroy to take them down actually fits with the lore of the spectral knights. You see, they're duty bound as eternal ghosts to protect the mausoleum and prevent its damage. And that's why there's just so many of them here patrolling around and trying to stop me approaching the mausoleum. The glowing skulls then could in fact be their actual skulls, the headless soldiers and spectral ghosts. The question is, after we take out enough skulls and the mausoleum becomes no longer active, what happens to the spectral knights? Well, as you can see, they begin to die. I have never stopped to actually watch that. I've never really thought about those ghostly guys, why they're there, what's causing them, and where they go when I take down the mausoleum. In fact, I completely forgot about them every time I've ever encountered them. So Frosterzen, I think that's a really good theory and an apt conclusion on the source of those ghosts and what the skulls actually are on the mausoleum. No longer duty bound, or the fact that I've destroyed them ultimately means they can die and be gone from this land. Really cool detail, really cool theory. Let me know what you guys think of it. Now, one of my favorite weapons in the entire game is the Blasphemous blade here, which actually comes, of course, from Rykard, but it's not necessarily the mechanics of this weapon that makes it one of my favorites, although that certainly helps. It's very overloaded, isn't it, with this incredible Ash of War and the passive healing and all the lifesteal effects. Ultimately, this is a really cool design. You've got the writhing family members along the length of the blade. It is gruesome, it is gritty, it really fits with the boss that it comes from. But why I'm bringing it up is actually there's art books that have come out for Elden Ring now, finally. And within that, we're able to see the original version of the blade. As you can see, before it was all grimy and horrible and covered in the writhing family, it is just quite a satisfying golden blade with that one red jewel in the crossguard and at the end of the pommel. This was likely the sword of Rykard himself, but before he became the serpent monster that we know him as today. You see, Rykard was actually a Justicar, an executioner of sorts. It's said that he was described as a ruthless Justicar who was commanding a company of Inquisitors. That was his role within the kingdom. Obviously, he spent a lot of time here at the Volcano Manor, which is where he was developing the lava sorceries and incantations. But we know that he also traveled and left this place, and that's where he met Tanith in a foreign land and brought her back here to be his consort. It's interesting to think that he would bring royals here to have dinner with them and talk to them and learn about them, while beneath their feet while they dined with him, surely at the same time many other royals and such were being chained up, caged up and tortured as the Inquisition continued under their feet. So Rykard was never all that nice of a guy before he turned into the monster. So it's interesting to see how his blade really hasn't actually changed. The core remains the exact same. Where other boss weapons have been broken, changed and altered, this is the same thing, just now arriving in his forced family. What a weapon, what a design. Really cool lore. Now, in the more current patches of Elden Ring, with patch 1.07 and 1.08 majorly affecting poise and hyper armor and things like that, there was a build that I recently did to do with the various Ghostflame abilities, like the Rancor Coal, or most importantly, the explosive Ghostflame, which is a high damaging explosion of this frosty fire that's really cool. The problem is that you're very interruptible while doing this long animation, leaving you exposed, whether you're doing PvE or PvP. Which is why someone in the comments of a previous episode, NGG4399, which is a hard to pronounce name other than that, says, well, what if you just use the benefit of the Ash of War, Endure, which is going to give you that armor and hopefully give you the opportunity to actually cast the spell without being interrupted. You see, there's a lot more abilities out there, a lot more weapons with unique Ashes of War, and a lot of spells and incantations as well that could really benefit from having a bit more hyper armor. Well, technically, if you use something like this, it's not much weight, it's a quick, cheap FP Ash of War. Let's see if it works. Let's see if I don't get interrupted by this big giant when I use Endure at the same time. Here we go. I've waited as long as I can, really. Yep, there you go. That is a fantastic tip. That's such a good idea. I really wasn't expecting a giant not to stagger me, considering I've got no poise in this build at all. I've got no talismans that are helping me with that. I'm wearing cloth armor, literally the lowest poise set possible, and Endure works even now, despite its nerf in a previous patch after getting a bit overbuffed. That'll work with so many spells and incantations and various Ashes of War. That's a really good tip and really good combination. So thank you for that, NGG. Next up, a really cool detail that originates from our first Soulsborne series game. Now, when you go into a dark area like I'm in now, we actually have a really subtle glow about us, a bit of vision, a bit of light. You can see it best when I look down. Now, it might be hard to see on YouTube because obviously it's going to be a bit darker on that resolution, but you can see very clearly that there is darkness ahead of me, there's darkness behind me, but around me is a kind of small glow, a light source that shows me exactly where I'm standing. Now, we can greatly improve the distance of this light source by equipping a lantern, which goes on my hip like so, and also using torches and other light-based things. This comes from Ritzler, though, who talks about the origins of this mechanic, and I spotted this on Twitter recently. They say there's actually a reason for that glow to contextualize why you have a glowing light about you at all times. Now, it was a lot more prominent in the older games before we actually had, say, this lantern mechanic. The original form of this was the Augite of Souls, a small crystal that simply glows on your waist in the exact same position that we equip the lantern today, providing a mechanic that gives us light in darker areas, but also contextualizing it with a little bit of lore and reasoning. The power of the souls that you collect as you play through, seemingly powering your light. It's sort of a representation that you are alive and you have power within you. And yet, today in Elden Ring, that same mechanic, so many games later, still remains. This little source of light around us, even though we don't have anything like active like a torch or a lantern. And it's obviously mechanically very important for a video game like this. You need to be able to see at least a little bit, even in darker areas, to give yourself even a remote chance. And then obviously other mechanics like the lantern and torches are provided for making things a lot easier. But it's really cool to see that mechanic survive from the original game all the way to our current, many titles and many releases a decade later. Last but not least then, just a little interesting one and follow-up from a previous episode. Shrimp6348 in the comments last time mentioned that if you pay really close attention to the map, while we did look at the potential of Farum Azula all the way over there, being potentially in the middle of the map, and the way that it would connect the world together, explaining why certain enemies like the weird dog types can be found all the way in the mountaintops of the giants when they're only really found in Caelid normally. Well, the current shape of the world is actually familiar. It curls around all the way to Caelid, which has a sort of furling finger, if you will. Our tarnished furled finger is exactly that shape. Someone replied to that with a really interesting point. OVRCVR mentioned that the tip of the finger in many cases matches that concept on the map as well, where yes, the jewelist furled finger, at the end it's quite bloody, is it not? The same for the bloody fingers, which yeah, very specifically has that bloody fingertip. When we look at the map again to look at that finger shape, the end of the fingernail right here as it were, well, it is red because it's Caelid. A rather subtle comparison. One that I really like and I hope is genuinely intentional. But there you have it. That was today's episode of Things You Didn't Know. If you guys have any tips or suggestions for a thing you didn't know, then let me know in the comments, especially if you learned anything interesting in terms of our new content patch of 1.08 with the arenas or otherwise. For now though, thank you as always for supporting this series and getting involved. I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.